recurring narrative in our culture today is that science and Christianity are in conflict with each other. But is that really the case? I'm joined today by Dr. Jim Painter, who's going to help address that question. Jim, you are a scientist, you are a food scientist, a life scientist, and you also are a Christian. What would you say to somebody who says there's conflict between science and Christianity?
You know, I hear that periodically from my students. And my first question is, where? Okay, help me out with this. Where is this conflict? And they say, well, one disproves the other. And I say, how? And then I come in with, the first Christians, the first scientists were all Christians. Really? Yeah, all of them. All these laws, all the physics laws from Newton, he was more like a preacher scientist. He was really involved in the Bible. And so all the way back to Galileo, they say Galileo was fighting the church. Well, not really. He's a Christian. He started looking for this design, and then he saw out there at Jupiter planets, thing going on, and he's going, this is right. The sun's the center of this thing. Now, true that it took a while for the church to catch on, but it took a long time for science to catch on too. And so all of these beginning people, when students ask me that, I say, well, all of the first scientists that we talk about, the modern science from the 17th century, they were just almost all Christians to a person. Mm-hmm. And each one, I love Kepler. When Kepler was trying to figure out, because it didn't seem like these planetary motion things were working, and then all of a sudden he came up with an elliptical. This makes everything fit. And he said, we're just thinking God's thoughts after him. He gets the credit. I thought, I love that. Yeah. So people write me something and say, that was really great, Dr. Painter. And I have my students write back, he's really appreciative of that, but he agrees with God, or with Kepler, that God gets the credit for all of this. And they write that, and people go, yeah, fine, whatever. Or they go, oh, that's pretty neat. But yeah, it all started there.
Yeah. So what is it about the Christian worldview, do you think, that created a milieu where these very first practitioners of science were also Christians?
As I've looked at this, I can't see a way, looking at an Eastern mindset, that you'd actually be able to come up with this, because there's cyclical things over there, and it happens and happens again. You go back and you go through these things. And in Christianity and then Western culture, it was all linear. You go back, there was Abraham, there was Isaac, there was Jacob, Jesus came, there's going to be the end time. And everything is linear. And that really gave support to people like Newton that are coming up with ideas that seem to be regularities. He's looking for regularities, and so the apple drops on his head or whatever happened. I don't know if that's really true, but he sees that and then goes, wait a minute, from his whole perspective, everything is linear and it is real. In the beginning, God created the heavens. It's a real thing. And in the East, it isn't really real. The real thing is the mind and the thoughts and all that stuff. And various ways people look at it, to where it's not even there, or it's illusory, or it's just not the main thing. Well, it is. God made it. So all of these people then in the 1600s, 1650s were Christians, knowing it was created, looking at a real universe, coming up with real regularities that would continue throughout time. And so it just, when I talk to people now, and they just take it for granted, like, well, of course it works. Okay, but why? Why should, if everything just came out haphazardly, why should there be all of this symmetry and ability to, things to follow a regular order?
Yeah. So what about other discoveries in science that maybe seem to align with a Christian worldview?
Well, when I was born again 40 years ago, I found Institute for Creation Research, which was really good, because I heard their idea that really evolution isn't it, this is how it happened. Oh, good. And I hadn't really thought about it, the age difference, and whether it was 6 days or 6 billion years, I hadn't thought about that. And so when I started looking at the Big Bang, when I was in school 40 years ago, as you know, uniformitarianism was still pretty strong. It was still, Big Bang was there, and it was an option, but it was still, everything's been the way it's been forever, there's no beginning. And so there was this big pushback in science against the Big Bang, because it sounds like in the beginning God. Right. And that's, we really don't want that. I'd rather have it go on forever, and we don't have to have a beginning. Well, once we started looking at this beginning, and I'm not a physicist, and when people talk that way around here, it just bothers me because I don't get it. But as far as I can understand it, with the Big Bang, it all came about in the beginning. I thought, isn't that amazing? All time, all space, all matter, all energy was not, and then it was. And it started, and I thought, wow, that should catch every scientist's attention, that it began, and there must be a beginner to the beginning.